Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Natalia, and this is in the clause of cognitive biases, how to use them in our favor. This are the clause, and this is the description of my presentation that you might have read or not. And to start off, what I would like to do is, since it's not the first presentation on cognitive bias that we had some time ago, our colleague Danny Lopez had also a presentation on this topic, which is super great, by the way. And that's why I would like to check how well do you maybe remember things that he said. So I'd like you to read the description again and guess and check if you can guess what bias I was sneaky enough to hide here. So if you know, just let me, I'll give you a second to think, and maybe someone will want to. So here's a hint. And the answer actually is in that description. So, okay, let me just tell you. So the bias that I hit here is the illusion of transparency, which we can remember or we may not remember that. It's a tendency to assume others know what we know already. So you might have not seen the previous presentation. You may not even attend presentations, our presentations, and theoretically, this could be the first time you learn about the cognitive bias. So me assuming that we all know about this was far-fetched. And even though it's a trivial example, then I think that it's still valid to illustrate and talk about this thing that we need to remember about the cognitive bias, and that is the fact that, well, to remember or maybe state it for the first time if you didn't in fact know about this. So the shortcuts that our brain does in order to save mental energy cause errors called cognitive biases that trick us to act a certain way or believe certain things are true while they're not. And these shortcuts, we call them cognitive biases. They're also a good shortcuts. Like, by the way, we have heuristics that are really good for us, and thanks to them, we were able to survive as a humankind. So these specifically are the ones that cause the errors and make us misjudge people. And the thing is that 90% of cognition happens below the conscious level. And I'm not sure how they measured the exact percent, but it's a lot. And the thing is that even though even if you know about them, it's still hard to apply that and to not perform the harmful behaviors or speak with the way that is misjudging others. And so we are surrounded by bias. And it's hard to see it in everyday life because we don't search for it, and biases really like to play hide and seek. So, and the last thing is something that I call the thing about cognitive biases, and that is, well, the fact that knowing is not enough. So if you really care about not performing these harmful behaviors, which I'm also talking to myself here, then you have to iterate with the knowledge, you have to interact with the knowledge, because otherwise you just forget. And so this is actually the plan of this presentation. First, for the intro, I would like to talk quickly about my main inspiration for this talk, and also an approach that is mine, and then we will go through this list of biases. Um, that is horn effect, framing effect, ageism, bandwagon effect, priming, cognitive fluency, and language biases. These are some that I've chosen out of many, many others. And then I'll just recap. So, inspiration. So, you may or may not know this guy. His name is David Dylan Thomas, and he is a content strategist, and he's very much into cognitive biases, the whole concept of human technology and design and ethical design and all that jazz. So if you're interested in that, I also recommend checking him out. He also have the Cognitive Bias podcast with plus 100 episodes that I also took inspiration from, and he also wrote this book, Design for Cognitive Bias. So this is my main source. And then my approach maybe. So I think before I jump into the biases, I believe it's important for me to answer the question how to make them work in our favor, because it may be not that obvious. So the way I'm approaching that is, it's not a revolutionary knowledge that I'm doing. These mechanisms are harmful, and so the only way we can make them work in our favor is by using their occurrence to strive for and create better user experiences that I also actually mentioned in the description already, and using the shortcuts for good instead of evil. That's the motto of this guy as well. Okay, so let's start with the first one, and the bias is called horn effect. And so you might have heard about the halo effect. So this is the bad brother of that bias, and it's a tendency to make an overall negative judgment of someone possessing one unfavorable trait or feature. So mainly from my experience and researching that, it's like one of the most common examples of that is how we perceive people as bodies that have some appearances, and with that we connect many other traits that they have and their personality. And this is really something that is inside us from our childhood, really, because if I think of like the movies, the everything that I was watching or even reading, always the good guys are beautiful and nice, and the bad guys are always less attractive, and so this is something that is really there. And so, yeah, so this is how you can visualize that. And yeah, so for all of that biases, I wrote some tips that, based on all that I found out, I would recommend even myself doing these things. And so, like, the tip that I have for this one, it's the shortest bias I think that I have, but it's about how it's good to think of that bias when cooperating with clients and colleagues, and especially like the first meetings that we really are starting to get to know the people that we are going to work with, and think of it also during user testings. And it may seem that maybe to you that it may not be as common, but for example, from my experience, that time I was working in Salsita, I'm guilty of both of it. So I will not mention the specifics, but with our team, we did have a little problem with the horn effect with some client, and we did spot that, but it was after some time. And so the things they do happen, and the same thing with user testing. It's easy to go into that route of thinking. If, for example, you're having some idea or that you're testing, and suddenly someone is contradicting you and saying that they don't like the idea. So you may think, okay, they just don't know about this, and then everything else they say you just discard. So definitely, I would be guilty of that. But I think it's just the key is to be aware of it, and yeah, do that. And yeah, okay, so there's now the framing effect. This one is really important. And this is the tendency to draw different conclusions from the same information, depending on how that information is presented. So these are some examples of how that could look like. So it's very commonly used in marketing, as you can see on the left. So like a frozen yogurt that would be with 20% of fat is, I guess, worse than a frozen yogurt with 80% fat-free. And also here on the right, some examples on UI design, how, well, the concept about this bias is that it's better to frame something for the users that we are giving them something and they don't lose. So they prefer to gaining something rather than losing. So yeah, so at the top, if you have the 96% spam free, you are spam free. So you have something, and here on the left, it's something like only, so lack something. And here is one of my favorites. You might have seen that already because I believe it's really popular, but it's a great example of the framing effect in news marketing, and how the original ad was here Pepsi saying, "We wish you a scary Halloween," with the Coca-Cola's yeah, this thing. And then this was like the Coke's response, and this for Pepsi. I think it was pretty iconic. Okay, and then framing in user testing is really important. And here I presented to you 3 ways that we can extract some opinion during the testing. So we are investigating whether the navigation, the website is intuitive for the user or not. We can ask, I saw that you were confused when navigating the website. What was the issue? We can say, what was easy or difficult about navigating the website? Or we can say, you were having difficulty navigating the website. Why so? And so we probably can guess that that's the best one that is not biased, because the two are suggesting that to the user that they did have some difficulties, and that didn't have to be the case. So I think even when asking about feedback, even internal, it's much better to ask, what did you think of the design, and not, did you like the design? Because if we ask, did you like the design, they can really answer either yes or no. And if you ask, what did you think of design, they can start thinking more broadly, and making things more detailed. That is obviously beneficial for us. Yes, here's another example of the framing effect that I believe is really nice to think of in initial phases of the project when we brainstorm, cooperate. But yeah, so here we have this person, and we can ask this question, whether we think this person should drive this car. And if you are going with that biased route of thinking, you can think, okay, this person, the trait that I'm seeing here, the main trait is that this person is an elderly. By the way, this, I'll be talking about this later, this is also a biased word, looks like. So but anyway, so this person is older and maybe they're not in the best health anymore, so they may not see well anymore, so they shouldn't drive this car. So what we're really doing is saying this person is elderly, so they shouldn't drive this car. And this is, by the way, also the horn effect. So taking this one trait that is in fact here negative, because I believe that in today's world we see being older as something negative. I definitely think so. So this one negative trait causes that like stream of other assumptions. But yeah, and this is also an example that David Dillon was talking about, that if we frame the situation like that, then we get a policy discussion with people saying, okay, this person should drive because so, and so on, but and other being the opponents. But if we frame the discussion like that, so how might we, like, how might this person drive this car? Then we get a design discussion, and out of it, we'll always have something useful. So the tip that I'm having here for the designers, for myself, is to use UI to frame positively, show gain, and don't scare people with rules, to make sure you're not leading people during testing, and try not to ask questions that can be answered with yes or no. Making sure you're asking the right questions and not being afraid to reframe them. I think it's really important for the, like I said, initial stages of the project. And ageism, that is actually continuing this theme of being older, but that's okay. And so this is an example of a bias of specific group, minorities bias, and this is the tendency to stereotype and or discriminate against individuals or groups on the basis of their age. And so here I just wanted to mention that how it doesn't only happen in the digital sphere. Here is like I thought of it right from the start, like a 5-minute video from NN Group about signing for elderly or older people, and about a great example of how how we are not making a good job just designing like normal everyday life products for older people. And so he talks about how a walker for older people, it used to be, and it still is, the common one here, that is just really so not functional, and it's just looks like it's made out of the cheapest way, not caring about these actual people at all, and making them feel embarrassed to even try something like this. And it's also connected to the horn effect, that if someone sees a person with a walker like that, they automatically assume that, okay, they are probably also they can't hear me well, so I'll have to speak super loudly to them and just treat them like a child. And that's just not the case. They just have a problem with walking. So that's just a side note, to look around for design opportunities. An example that I actually thought of is, like, are your parents or grandparents good with smartphones and computers? Because mine are not, and I'm thinking is it again that we will blame them for that, that it's something wrong with them, or maybe we are not introducing them correctly to the new technologies? Maybe they need another approach. Yeah, so that's just something to think about. And then the bandwagon effect, which is the tendency to think, do, want things if other people are thinking, doing, wanting, or having them already. I hope that makes sense grammatically. So this is a very interesting one, and here is some graphical representation of that. This made me laugh a lot. So and then this is very super, because if I think about this bias, then I always think about this tale, which is the Emperor's New Clothes, written by Hans Christian Andersen. And so if you want to read something that is a synonym of this bias, then this is a good thing. And yeah, in the end, only the child sees through the faults of all of that. And so the tip here is to be the first person that expresses the opposite opinion and disapproval. This is also about communication, like internal one with the team, because it also all influences our work. And yeah, and just this talk is also about how to, I guess, be a better designer, or just a better open person to communicate to. And be the first person, be the first person that expresses the opposite opinion, disapproval, because this way you may enrich the discussion by presenting a point of view that no one even considered. It will break the stigma, and you may find out that more people wanted to support you but weren't strong enough to break through. And you may be right in the end, like the child from the tale was. Okay. Yeah, and another tip is that connected to the framing effect is to provide beneficent social proof, because I believe that for this bias, we can actually combine UX side of things and more of a business side of things. Because let's say that we have a great product, then if we have a great product, then we probably have great reviews. So it will be both beneficial for product owners and people to see that good reviews right away once they enter the website or application, or just will be first introduced to the product. Okay, and then we have the priming, which is a phenomenon whereby exposure to one stimulus influences a response to a subsequent stimulus without conscious guidance or intention. And I think that is understood. And actually, there's something else that I wanted to discuss more, but it is a kind of a priming, but it's called proactive interference. And this is the tendency to forget information due to interference from events or learning that occurred prior to the current learning activity. And this may sound a little mysterious, but if you don't know already what it means, then if you look at that, you may start to understand. So what I mean is that I think during our lives, everyone had this moment where usually we have keys in one place, but then we move them somewhere in a new place, and then we look for them in that old place, and it's just terrible, and we can't stop doing that. And the same thing, I think, most common about close to the same thing, that the keys is like a phone pin for me, a terrible thing. And so this actually has an influence on design as well, and this is a proof that this is like the result of this tendency. So yeah, so the point that I'm making here is that we need to be careful about changing things, because it may be hard for people to go through something new if these were radical changes. So yeah, as you can, as I wrote here on the right, people just get used to products, and if they need to go through something completely new, completely flow, then it requires a lot of energy and time for them to do that. And also, most of the people see like technology as tools. So if they're slowed down, it slows down their productivity, and there's a very, very big dissatisfaction. So one tip is just to, before changing crucial UI or parts of the product, be aware of the attachment that the users have to the product, and also to the brand, which is a big topic as well. I think I didn't include that here, but there was this, I think, very famous failed rebranding with Gap that they made some time ago, and they had to change. They had their logo, and they changed that because they wanted to be more modern. And then they had to go back to that to the same logo. Like, I think it was just a week ago, a week later, or something like that, because people hated it. That's how they were attached to the brand. And cognitive fluency is the next one. This is the tendency to subjectively rate how easy or difficult it will be to process and complete a given mental task. And some rules about that, which the last one is definitely interesting. So it means that if something is easy to read, then it will be easy to do. Hard to read, hard to do. So it mostly is about the design, the UI, and the branding. So the fonts, the colors, the contrast, how well the text is visible, and how much amount of information there is there. Another point: videos are easier to process than text, and yeah. And then the unexpected one is that rhymes make the information more true to us. And here's an example of that. And so the tip is to strive for minimalism and transparency in design. Be be concise with copy, and rhyme if you are saying the truth. But if you're not saying the truth, then don't, because people will think that you are telling the truth. And the last one, which is a short one, it's the language biases. So all the words and phrases that are considered predicated, offensive, and hurtful for certain people or groups, and make them feel excluded. Here are some rules for that. Some example of categories. And here are an examples. Like, for example, we say blacklist and not blocklist. We say elderly, like I was saying. I was reading some interview with some neurologists, how he said that this really is a biased language, and a lot of people have a problem with that. So older people, seniors, mankind versus humanity, handicap versus with a disability, and a lot more. And so the tip is that language shapes our reality. So let's just be conscious of the microcopy and minorities. Yeah, and that is it. So for the recap, I just wanted to once again answer that question, how to make the biases work in our favor. It's not anything revolutionary, but I think it's important to state that if we really care about that, we should, first of all, know about them, read about them, remember them. I should also add, like, iterate all the knowledge and then using them to make good instead of evil, aka making opportunity out of limitation. And I believe that is it. Do you maybe have some questions or questions?